Hello and welcome to climbingarborist.com. In this episode of Advanced Climbing Techniques, I'm going to do an introduction to single rope work positioning. The most important thing to know before working from a single leg of line is that you must never work solely from a hitch cord, because the full body weight of a climber will melt through the cord. So you need to use a specialist device designed for single rope work positioning, like the hitchhiker, or like the rope wrench that I'm attaching to the line here. These devices are designed by adding friction into the system, taking a lot of the climber's weight, which allows the climber to work with friction cord. Single rope work positioning has taken off hugely in the last few years within the arb industry. This is mainly down to some devices coming onto the market, such as the Unisender, which is a mechanical friction device, the rope wrench, which I'm using here, and also the hitchhiker. These devices are ideal for the arb industry because they allow transition between ascent and descent without any changeover of devices. So there are lots and lots of benefits to working single rope, which is why it's taken off in such a big way. So I'll run through a few of the main benefits. I'm not going to be able to cover them all because there are so many, even slight little benefits, but I'll run through the main ones. So number one, the friction that you get when you're climbing around will always stay the same, because you, the climber, are moving up and down the line. The line is not moving like in double technique. So it doesn't matter if you're over a limb this big, if you're adding 5 redirects in, the friction will always stay the same because you're moving up and down the rope is not moving. So that's a fantastic benefit. Another great advantage to single rope work positioning is you only have to set your rope. I always set mine a few meters longer than the height of the tree, so once you've got your final tying point, you set your rope a few meters, so there's a few meters on the ground, and then as you're climbing around, if you're feeding your rope through over limbs and stuff, you're only ever pulling the rope the height of the tree or the length that you set. So you don't have all that extra weight, you don't have to pull through like 100 foot of rope through a fork. Another great benefit to working single rope is the fact that you don't have to isolate a limb when you're using a throw line like you would do in double rope technique, because you can use a base tie, which means you can use your throw line, get a good solid limb, and then just send the line all the way down the back of the tree, hook up your base tie anchor, and you can save yourself quite a lot of time if the tree is quite tricky to isolate a limb. And the base tie itself can become a benefit in single rope work positioning in the form of a lowerable system. So the system can be set up so it can be lowered from the ground by the groundsman in the case of an emergency. Obviously the climber could cut himself, injure himself, and go into shock. Can encounter hornet's nests, which can be very severe if stung multiple times. Or even if you're training climbers and there's the worry that they could freak out maybe if they're quite new to it, so you need the advantage there that you can lower them down without the climber having to do anything themselves. So that's a good safety feature. The only thing you've got to be aware if working off of a base tie, lowerable or fixed, is you've always got to be aware of that leg of line under tension that could be around the back of the tree, out of sight. You just always got to be aware that it's there. And also if you're rigging, you don't really want to be rigging big lumps of wood and smashing into the line under tension. So there's advantages and disadvantages to the base tie system. So an extremely important point that you have to know about using a base tie is the forces involved. So to put it simply, if I weigh 70 kilos, then the line's going up, coming down, and I've tied it off at the base tie. Me hanging on this line at 70 kilos, the base tie has to then match my force with 70 kilos, making the force on the tying point if the rope's going pretty much 180 degrees, is 140 kilos, and that is static weight. So once you start climbing and using force to move your body up, that then creates even more force. So just be aware that the tying point has got to be solid. You've got to have a good view of your tying point. That could mean using binoculars if you're throwing or big shotting into a tree pretty high. So just have a good clear line of sight of what you've tied into, and be confident that it's solid, and then get 2 or 3 guys just to bounce on the rope a little bit, just to make sure that your tying point is not going to snap. So a piece of equipment that's essential for single rope work positioning is the foot ascender. So not only are you going to use it for ascending from the ground, maybe in conjunction with hand ascenders or another type of rope walking system, but also within the tree while you're climbing around, because whereas in the doubled system you'd be pulling down and pulling your body up, because this is the static line, it's very hard to grab on and sort of pull yourself up an 11mm rope, your whole body weight, especially if you're working in a tree all day. That's not going to happen. So the foot ascender even helps you do little sort of 4 or 5 foot ascents between branches if they're just out of reach, and because you're using your leg, makes it easier because it's the strongest muscle in your body. So I'll just give you a quick demonstration of the most simple method of ascent, which is the sit-stand method. So the sit-stand method is pretty simple. You just stand up onto your foot ascender and then sit back into your hitch. So you want to make sure your hitch is biting pretty well to do this, and then just repeat that over and over again. And you'll see that you can ascend pretty efficiently just by using the one foot ascender. Redirects are another huge part of single rope work positioning, much more so than in doubled rope technique, as in doubled rope you're pretty much restricted to one redirect and you have to set that up pretty well, so you don't get added friction. Whereas in single rope positioning, because there's no extra friction as you redirect, you can set up as many redirects as you like. The only restricting factor is if you're going to have to go and retrieve them, if you're using, say, webbing slings, or when you come to pull your rope out from a base tie, the extra friction that you've created through various redirects, so you're going to have to make sure you can pull it out. And when you get into redirects, you have your natural redirect going through a crotch, and you have your false redirects using webbing slings, which then can be turned into static redirects to help share loads between anchor points. So yeah, redirects are a key thing to energy saving and work positioning. So one of the things that people struggle with most in single rope work positioning is when you go out on a long limb walk, especially a limb walk that is sort of drooping down. The issue that you can face is pulling yourself back in on the limb walk. Because on a doubled rope technique, you have that slight mechanical advantage, and you're pulling your own body weight to take your weight off all the time as you're coming back in. Whereas on single rope, you sort of have to pull yourself in above the hitch and then tend your slack, and always keeping your weight on your arms, especially if you're pulling yourself up a limb, it can be quite awkward. So there's one way you can get around that, is giving yourself a 3-to-1 advantage to pull yourself back in. So here I've attached a prusik loop, 6-wrap prusik, and it's got a thimble on the end of the prusik, and then to that I've just put a revolver DM revolver carabiner on. So before you go on your limb walk, put the tail of your rope through that prusik, and then you need to keep the tail with you. So you can just hook it in the side there. Go out on the limb walk as you normally would. And then when it's time to come back in, all you've got to do then is just pull on the tail of your line, and nice and easy, you've got that 3-to-1 mechanical advantage there, which makes this way easier than even doubled rope technique. And then when you just sit back in, your friction cord and your rope wrench or whatever you're using will just grab, and then you can just unclip the tail of your line, take that off, and off you go. You can also use like a cam descender on that if you like. If you've got a hand descender with you, do the same thing. I just prefer to use a hitch.